The first time I saw my son, he was barefoot on a TV screen, begging on a filthy street I'd never walked in my life. I only recognized him because the scar on his left hand was identical to the one on mine. If it were you, what would you have done? Just kept eating your lunch, or dropped everything, and chased that ghost of a chance like your life depended on it? My name is Marcus, and where I live in Lagos, people like to call me a billionaire, a tycoon. The man at the top of the tallest building in the city. They say my name with respect in boardrooms and whisper it in business news. But for a long time when I went home at night, all that money just echoed around a silent mansion that had no wife, no children, no laughter, nothing but me and my regret. You know what I mean, that feeling when everyone thinks you have everything, and deep down you know you're walking around with a hole in your chest no amount of success can fill. That day started like any other. I was in my office on the top floor, looking down at Lagos through thick glass, while the sound of traffic came up like a distant ocean vapor spread across my polished wooden desk. Contracts about land deals, construction projects, expansion plans, all the things that were supposed to prove I had made it. My assistant came in quietly, like she always did. Set a cup of hot tea by my hand, adjusted a few files. Then at lunchtime, she brought in a tray of food and picked up the remote. Turning on the big TV on the wall so I could half watch the news while I pretended to eat. Politics, infrastructure. Some minister talking about new roads. I barely heard any of it. I was just pushing food around my plate, my mind somewhere else, the way it always drifted if I sat still too long. Then the news anchor's tone changed. They said they were switching to a special documentary about children living in poverty in Lagos, focusing on Makoko, a community built on water, a place people like me usually only talk about when we're donating money at a charity gala. I almost told my assistant to change the channel. I didn't like watching those stories in the middle of a workday. I'd donate, sure, but I didn't want to sit and feel helpless. And then the camera cut to a shot that made my fork freeze halfway to my mouth. A small boy was sitting on a dirty corner. No shoes. Clothes ripped, knees pulled up to his chest, like he was trying to take up as little space in the world as possible. His face was smudged with dust and old tears, but his eyes were bright and stubborn, sharp like he refused to quit, even though life had done nothing but hit him. People walked past him like he wasn't even there, like he was just part of the road. And then the camera zoomed in. The boy lifted his left hand palm up, asking for coins, and I saw it, a long pale scar running from the base of his thumb, almost all the way to his wrist. Same angle, same length, same position as the scar on my own hand. My fingers went numb. The fork slipped and hit the plate with a loud, ugly clatter that made my assistant spin around. "Sir, are you all right?" she asked. I didn't answer. I pushed my chair back so hard it rolled into the wall. I stood up and walked toward the TV like a man in a trance. My eyes locked on that boy's hand, my own left hand rising on its own, the old scar suddenly burning under my skin. A scar I had stopped even noticing years ago. Up close on the screen, the cameraman caught every detail, the way the scar cut across the boy's thin wrist, the way his fingers curled in as if he was ready to snatch mercy out of the air if it ever came close enough. It was like looking at a piece of myself from another lifetime, small and hungry and lost. And then, something hit me, not in my head. In my chest, like a voice saying, "Pay attention. This is not an accident. Turn it up," I said quietly. The reporter said they were filming in Makoko, that this boy's name was Tunde, that he had no known family, that he slept under a bridge, that he survived on whatever coins strangers dropped into his hand. As those words sank in, I turned to my assistant. I need the contact for the people who made this documentary. I said, my voice coming out lower than usual. Find out who filmed it, where exactly they were when they were there, and everything you can about that boy. Name, age, where he sleeps. Everything. She stared at me for half a second, surprised, then nodded, and grabbed her phone, dialing with the kind of speed you only use when you can tell something serious is going on. While she worked the phones, I stood there in front of the screen, my hand pressed over my scar, my mind jumping backward in time, whether I liked it or not. 9 years back to the moment my son was born, and my whole life broke open. I hadn't let myself walk fully into that memory for a long time, because every time I did, it felt like I was drowning. Within an hour, my assistant came back with a notepad, a little out of breath. Sir, she said, the documentary was filmed yesterday in Makoko. The boy's name is Tunde. No last name. He lives on the street, mostly under a bridge near the market. He used to stay with an old beggar, but the old man died 2 years ago. Nobody knows his family. My hands started to shake. I looked at my schedule on the computer, a wall of color-coded meetings and calls, things that 10 minutes earlier I would have said were critical million-dollar deals, important lunches, people flying in from other countries to see me. Cancel everything, I said. She blinked. Everything, sir. Yes. Everything. I'm going to Makoko. Personally, she asked, like she thought she misheard. Yes, I said, shrugging on my jacket. Personally. Was it smart for a man like me in an expensive suit with a gold watch to walk into one of the poorest neighborhoods in Lagos, a place people whisper about for crime and danger, where outsiders are instantly noticed and not always welcomed? Did I care at that moment? Not at all. All I could see was that scar and those eyes, and all I could feel was this wild hope and this old grief rising together like a storm. On the way down in the elevator, I caught my reflection in the mirrored walls. The successful man everyone saw, clean-cut, tailored suit, expensive tie, calm expression, and I almost laughed because inside I felt like a man dangling over a cliff by one frayed rope. My driver was waiting by the car. Where to, sir? He asked, opening the back door. Makoko, I said. He hesitated. Sir, that area is not very safe. Maybe we should take security or send someone ahead or... I'm going, I cut in. Just drive. We pulled out into the chaos of Lagos traffic, buses cutting across lanes, Okadas weaving between cars, vendors knocking on windows, selling water plantain chips, phone chargers, the whole city honking and shouting and pulsing with life. Normally, this noise annoyed me, but that day, it sounded far away, like I was underwater. I sat in the back seat, staring at my hand, replaying the boy's image over and over. If it were you, what would be running through your mind in that car? What if this is nothing? What if I'm crazy? What if I'm right? What if I'm about to rip open a wound that never healed? What should have been a short drive stretched into almost 2 hours through traffic jams and bottlenecks. And by the time we finally turned into the roads leading to Makoko, my nerves were stretched thin. We parked at the edge where the paved road gave way to something else, something rougher, a border between two different worlds, sitting inside the same city. When I stepped out, the smell hit me first. Smoke from cooking fires, stagnant water, sewage sweat, and something else, that raw smell of survival. The houses were unlike anything in my neighborhood. Wooden shacks balanced on stilts above dark water planks, connecting doorways. Narrow paths where kids ran barefoot and women washed clothes. Small boats gliding between the stilts like slow insects. Conversations hushed as people noticed me. I didn't belong here, and everyone could see that. My driver moved closer behind me, his eyes scanning the area. A few young men stood off to the side, looking me up and down, their gaze lingering on my watch. I felt the tension in the air, but I kept walking because the fear of not finding that boy was louder than any other fear I had. I started asking people, "Do you know a boy named Tunde?" Small, maybe 9 years old. Scar on his hand, sleeps under a bridge. Most people looked away. Some stared at me. Without answering, one man said, "We don't talk about other people here," and turned his back. Finally, I saw an old woman sitting by a small fire, stirring something in a battered pot. She watched me with a sharp gaze, the kind of eyes that had seen everything and lost a lot. I approached slowly, keeping my hands visible. "Ma," I said, "I'm looking for a boy named Tunde. I heard he sleeps under the bridge near the market. Do you know him?" She stared at me for a moment, then nodded. "I know him," she said. "He is a good boy. He doesn't steal, he just begs. Sleeps under the bridge there." She pointed down a path. I handed her some money, more than she expected, and she started blessing me in a rush of words as I walked away, following her directions. The path dropped lower, and soon we were under the bridge, where the light dimmed and the air grew heavy and damp. Under there, time felt different. The ground was a mess of soggy cardboard. Broken bottles, old blankets, plastic bags, people curled up on the floor, even though it was daytime, trying to sleep away hunger. The smell of urine and mold hung thick. Above us, I could hear cars thundering over the bridge, but down here, everything felt still. "Tunde," I called out, my voice echoing off the concrete pillars. "Tunde." No answer at first, just the drip of water and the shuffle of someone turning over in their sleep. I called again. "Tunde, my name is Marcus. I saw you on TV. I want to talk to you." Out of the shadows behind one of the big pillars, something moved. A small figure straightened up from a nest of cardboard and scraps, slowly stepping forward, ready to run if he needed to. When he stepped into the weak light, my breath caught. It was him, barefoot toes black with dirt, clothes torn and hanging loose ribs faintly visible through the fabric. Was too serious for a child, eyes full of suspicion and caution. The same eyes from the screen, only now they were locked on me. I raised my hands a little, palms open. "Are you Tunde?" I asked. He hesitated, then gave the tiniest nod. "How old are you?" I asked, gently. He shrugged. "Maybe 9, he said. "I don't know." "You don't know your birthday?" I said. He shook his head. "Never had one," he answered. And those words hit me like a punch, because birthdays are the most basic proof that someone was excited when you came into this world, and he never got that. I glanced down at his left hand, and there it was, the scar. Clear even in the dim light, cutting across his thin wrist. My mouth went dry. Without saying anything, I slowly raised my own left hand and turned it so he could see my scar. His eyes dropped to it, then flew back to his own hand, then to mine again. Confusion and shock flickering across his face. He didn't say a word, but in that silence, there was something, some invisible thread, tugging tight between us. "How did you get that scar?" I asked softly. He looked down. "I don't know," he answered. "It was always there. I don't remember." Do you remember your mother?" I tried. "Your father, anyone?" His head moved side to side. "No mother, no father. Baba found me when I was small. He begged with me. He died. I stayed here." I swallowed hard, feeling a familiar ache rise in my throat. I didn't want to scare him with my emotions, so I took a breath and tried to steady myself. "Tunde," I said, "my name is Marcus. I came here because I saw you on TV and because of this scar. I know this sounds strange, but I feel like there is a connection between us. I don't want to hurt you. I want to help you. Would you come with me to my home just to rest, eat, bathe, be safe for a while?" Immediately, he took a step back, his whole body tensing. "Why?" he asked. "What do you want?" "Fair question." "I don't want anything from you," I said, holding his gaze. "You don't owe me anything. I could not sleep if I walked away from you now. I have a place where you can be safe. A bed, food, clothes. You don't have to decide everything today. Just come and see." He looked around at the shadows, at the men sleeping on the floor, at a rat darting between boxes. Then at me again. I could see his thoughts written across his face. Adults lied. Adults left. Adults promised and didn't deliver. "If you try to hurt me," he said finally, voice small but strong, "I will run. I will not come back." "You should," I said. "If anyone tries to hurt you, you run. That is smart. But I give you my word. Tunde, that is not why I'm here." He stared one more second, then nodded just once. That tiny nod changed everything. We walked back out into the light. My driver watching carefully, eyes flicking between us, and the young men near the street. But no one said anything. When Tunde saw the car, he stopped like he'd hit an invisible wall. "You live in this," he whispered. I smiled a little. "No, I just ride in it," I said. "You'll see my house soon." He slid into the back seat hesitantly, one hand flat on the leather, like he was testing if it was real. As we pulled away from Makoko, he pressed his face to the window, looking out at the city like he was watching a movie from the inside for the first time. We stopped at a small shop where I bought him clothes. Shirts, trousers, underwear, socks, decent shoes, a jacket, even pajamas. He hugged the bundle tightly, like someone would snatch it away at any second. "Do I need to pay you back?" he muttered. "No," I said quietly. "These are gifts." "Why?" he asked again. "Because every child should have clothes that fit and shoes that don't hurt," I said. That's reason enough. When we finally turned into the driveway of my mansion, his eyes went huge. The gate rolled open, revealing the big white house 3 stories tall. Red roof fountain, spraying water into the air, flowers. In clean rows, everything polished and bright. "You live here?" he whispered, sounding half amazed, half scared. "Yes," I said. For the first time in a long time, I heard how ridiculous that answer sounded. Inside, the floors were marble. The chandeliers' glittered paintings lined the walls, soft furniture everywhere. The whole place felt like another universe compared to the shadow under that bridge. My housekeeper Patience came forward, wiping her hands on a towel. She froze when she saw Tunde saw the dirt under his bandaged feet, the way he hugged his clothes. "Patience," I said, "this is Tunde. He's staying with us now. Please help him bathe, give him something comfortable to wear, and make sure he feels welcome." Her face softened instantly. She walked up to him slowly. "Hello, Tunde," she said gently. "Come, my son. Let's get you cleaned up. You will feel much better." He looked at me and I nodded. "I'll be right here when you come back down," I said. When they went upstairs, I sat on the couch and realized my hands were still shaking. I thought about the scar, about the way he'd looked at it, about the way my chest had reacted when I saw him. I thought about my wife, about the ambulance, about the case that went nowhere. A while later, I heard footsteps on the stairs. When I looked up, Patience was leading Tunde back down. His hair was washed, his face clean. The new clothes fit him. His feet were wrapped in clean bandages and slid into soft shoes. He looked younger suddenly, like a child again, and not just a survivor. We sat together at the long dining table, a place that had become a symbol of my loneliness over the years, always set for one. Tonight there were 2 plates, rice, chicken, vegetables, breadfruit. I filled his plate and slid it toward him. "You can eat," I said gently. "All of this is for us." He picked up his fork. Slowly, took one small bite, Then another, then something in him snapped, and he started eating fast like he was racing against time, like if he didn't eat fast enough, it would vanish. He barely looked up, just shoveled food and swallowed, grabbed more. Watching that broke something inside me, because hunger leaves. Marks you can't see on the bodies, but you see it in the way someone eats, that fear you can't shake even when the table is full. "It's all right, Tunde," I said quietly. "The food isn't going anywhere. You can slow down, there's more if you want." He nodded, but his hand didn't slow for a while. That night, I showed him a bedroom on the second floor with a soft bed, clean sheets, fluffy pillows, a small desk, a closet for his clothes, a little shelf where I'd asked someone to put a few toys just in case. "This is your room now," I said. He stepped inside like he was stepping onto holy ground. Touched the bed, the pillow flicked the light switch on and off, looked out the window. For me, he whispered. "For you," I answered. "If you need anything, if you get scared, just call my name. I'll be nearby." He nodded, still in shock. I closed the door gently. I walked down the hallway to my own room, then stopped. Turned and went back. I slid down the wall next to his door and sat on the floor, my back against the cool plaster, listening to the small sounds inside, the creak of the bed, the rustle of blankets, the sigh of someone lying down somewhere soft for the first time. I didn't sleep much that night because my mind wouldn't let me. It kept dragging me back 9 years to another hospital, another another baby. Back then I wasn't rich. Joy and I were just starting out. I had big dreams, but small savings. She had the kind of smile that made all my failures feel like steps instead of dead ends. When she told me she was pregnant, I felt like the world had finally given me something I didn't have to fight for. We went for an early scan in a crowded hospital. The doctor rushed the machine old. The image fuzzy. He said it was one baby. We didn't question him. We were too excited picking names and colors and arguing about who the child would look like. Then, one night, Joy went into labor early. We raced to the hospital, which was chaos. Not enough, nurses, patients everywhere, people shouting. In that confusion, she delivered twins, but we didn't know because the man in charge, Dr. Adami, decided that our storm was his opportunity. He hid the first baby before anyone else could see, handed us only the second one. Joy, exhausted and weak, held the little boy and cried with joy, thinking he was our only child. I held her hand, I kissed her forehead, I counted tiny fingers and toes. I thought that moment was the beginning of everything. Then our baby started struggling. They said he needed to go to another hospital with better equipment, that he needed an ambulance transfer, that everything would be all right. Joy insisted on riding with him. I needed to stay back a few minutes to sign paperwork. She kissed me and said, "I'll call you when we get there." She never called. When I arrived at the second hospital, they looked at me like I was crazy. No ambulance had arrived. No patient with that name was on their list. I called Joy over and over. Her phone rang and rang and rang. The ambulance company swore the vehicle arrived empty. Empty. No mother, no baby. The police opened a case. We filed reports. They questioned staff, checked routes, even set up roadblocks for a while, but nothing. No witnesses. No evidence. It was like the road swallowed them whole. I spent every naira I had, then money I didn't have yet on private investigators, people who promised leads and delivered dead ends. Weeks blurred into months, months into years. At some point, all I had left was a closed file and too many nights staring at the ceiling. I buried myself in work because it was the only thing that didn't remind me of her all the time, even though she'd been there when I dreamed it all up. The business grew. I made deal after deal. I climbed to the top of that glass tower. But my heart stayed stuck in that hospital hallway, where she never walked back out. The only physical mark on my body from that time was the scar on my hand. I'd cut myself on a sharp piece of metal at the construction site around the same time my son was born. I remember looking into the incubator, once noticing a faint matching mark on his tiny hand, thinking like father, like son, and smiling through my exhaustion. And now, 9 years later, I had just brought home a boy from under a bridge who had that same scar. Does that sound like coincidence to you? The next morning, I woke up determined. I went downstairs early, made breakfast myself, something I'd stopped doing years ago when other people started doing everything for me. Tunde came down slowly, hair still damp from washing. Wearing his new clothes, eyes cautious, like he wasn't sure if the house would vanish if he blinked too long. "How did you sleep?" I asked. He slid into his chair. "The bed," he said, searching for words. "It feels like I'm lying on clouds, not on stone." I smiled. "Good. That's what a bed should feel like." When we finished eating, I put my cup down and took a breath. "Tunde, I said there is something I want us to do today. I want us to go to the hospital together. You are not sick. It's nothing like that. I just want a simple test." He stiffened a little. "What kind of test?" he asked. "It's called a DNA test," I said, trying to keep my tone calm and casual. "It is a way to see if two people are related, if they share blood." He went very quiet. "You think we are family," he said slowly. "I think it is possible," I answered, and that was the truth. My heart believes it, but I want proof. Proof can help us find answers. He swallowed and nodded. "Okay," he said. "If you go, I go." We drove to the best private hospital in Lagos. I had already called ahead, told them exactly what we needed, so there was no waiting, no questions. A nurse led us into a small room, asked Tunde to sit, took a cotton swab, and gently rubbed the inside of his cheek. He barely felt it. Then she did the same with me. "That's it?" he asked, surprised. "That's it," I said. "The hard part is waiting." As we walked out, he glanced up at me. "When will we know?" he asked. "In a few days," I said. 3, maybe. "What do you want it to say?" he asked suddenly. Honestly, that question knocked the air out of me for a second. "I want the truth," I said, "whatever it is. But I will tell you this, Tunde. No matter what the paper says, you're not going back under that bridge. That part is not up for debate." He studied my face, then nodded slowly. Those 3 days that followed were some of the longest days of my life. I kept him close. We stayed home. We explored the house, watched TV, walked in the garden, read simple books together. I told him about my childhood, about growing up poor with a fisherman father and a mother who sold vegetables, about reading by lantern light, about the scholarship that changed my life. He told me about nights when the rain soaked the cardboard he slept on, and he had to get up and stand under the bridge, shivering in wet clothes. About days he begged, until his voice was hoarse, and still went to bed hungry. About the old man who called him son, even though they weren't related. With every story, I felt more and more that this was not some random boy I was helping. This was mine. Whether the test confirmed it or not, my heart had already made up its mind. On the 3rd day, my phone rang. The hospital. "Mr. Marcus." "Your results are ready," the voice said. You know that feeling right before something big happens, that hum inside your bones, like the air itself is thicker. That's how it felt driving back to the hospital with Tunde sitting beside me, swinging his legs nervously, asking fewer questions than usual. At the hospital, the doctor led me into his office and asked Tunde to wait outside for a moment. The boy sat on a plastic chair in the hallway, his small hands folded in his lap, his eyes on the floor. The doctor handed me a sealed envelope. It had my name on it. It might as well have had my entire life written on it. I sat down, and for a second, I just stared at it, my fingers unable to move. Part of me wanting to know everything, part of me wanting to freeze time right there in the not knowing. Then I tore it open and scanned the page. Positive. We were a match. Tunde was my biological son. I don't know how long I sat there, but at some point my vision blurred, and I realized I was crying. Not polite tears, but full-body shoulders. Shaking sobs I hadn't let myself release in years. The doctor quietly put a box of tissues on the desk and stepped out, closing the door behind him, giving me a moment to break down in peace. 9 years of questions, 9 years of imagining horrible scenarios, 9 years of wondering if I was crazy for still hoping. And now, in black and white, the answer was staring up at me. My son had been alive all this time, sleeping under bridges, begging on street corners, while I sat in an office in a glass tower, trying not to feel anything. When I finally pulled myself together and stepped into the hallway, my eyes were red. Tunde looked up alarmed. "Did something bad happen?" he asked, fear creeping into his voice. I sank down on one knee in front of him, so we were eye level. I took his hands in mine. "Tunde," I said gently, "you remember I told you this test would tell us if we are family?" He nodded slowly, his eyes not leaving my face. "Well," I continued, my voice shaking, "we are. The test says what my heart already knew. That scar, the timing, everything. You are my son." He yanked his hands away like my words were hot. "No," he said, shaking his head. Backing up, "I don't have a father. I don't have family. I am alone." His whole identity, the way he'd survived, was built on that belief that he had nobody and needed nobody, because needing people had only hurt him. I could see the panic in his eyes. I thought the same thing I said softly for a long time, that my family was gone, that I was alone. "But you were taken from me, Tunde. From me and from your mother. I went to the police. I spent everything I had trying to find you, trying to find her. I never chose to leave you. You were stolen. And now by some miracle I saw you on a TV screen." His lips trembled. "My mother," he whispered. "Where is she?" That question was a knife. "I don't know." I told him honestly. But now that we have this proof, we have a better chance of finding out what happened. I can't promise you the answers will be easy, but I can promise you this: you will not have to face them alone." He stood there, processing, tears filling his eyes. Then he took one shaking step forward, then another. Suddenly, he threw himself into my chest, his arms wrapping around my neck, his face buried in my shirt. I held him as tight as I dared, feeling his small body against mine. And for the first time in 9 years, I felt something in me, something heavy and cold, start to thaw. Now here's where the story flips. And if you thought that was the big twist I'm telling you, we haven't even gotten to the wild part yet. Stick around, because what happened next will blow your mind. The DNA results gave us more than just a personal answer. They gave us leverage. We took them straight to the police. I brought every old file I had from Joy's disappearance, laid it all out in front of Detective Chidi, who had taken over from the retired officer. He listened, eyes focused, then said, "We start with the ambulance. Drivers first." Through a combination of police work and the best private investigators money can hire, we tracked down both ambulance drivers from that night. The older one repeated the same story he'd told back then. They drove. They followed orders. They arrived, mother and baby gone. He knew nothing. It was a tragedy that haunted him. The younger driver, though, had a different look in his eyes when we sat him down in that small room. Guilt. The kind that eats at your insides for years. He admitted that during the ambulance ride, they had been told to make a stop. A black SUV pulled up beside them. 3 masked men with guns forced open the back doors, dragged Joy and the baby out, threatened them both if they screamed. The older driver told him to shut up, to drive, to forget. He'd been carrying that secret ever since. Detective Chidi wrote it all down, every detail. We asked if the younger driver remembered anything else, any faces, any license plate numbers. He shook his head, but then he said, "One of the men, he had a tattoo snake and dagger on his left arm." That small detail was like a Bukindrigra. Chidi reached out to his contacts on the street, his informants, people who paid attention to tattoos and gangs and whispered names. Within days, a name came back. Bio, a known criminal, big man, snake and dagger tattoo on his left arm, currently in prison on an unrelated armed robbery charge. We went to see him. In the visiting room, Bio looked like the kind of man you don't bump into on purpose. Broad shoulders, scars on his face, eyes that had seen violence and walked away from it. At first he denied everything, leaned back in his chair, smiled this cold smile. Money talks, though, especially when it's for a man's family on the outside. I made it clear, if he told us what he knew, I would take care of his wife and children, pay school fees, make sure they didn't suffer because of his choices. Slowly, his posture changed. He told us that 9 years ago, his crew was hired by a doctor to intercept an ambulance. Take the woman and baby inside, deliver them to a specific house outside the city. Get paid, ask no questions. They grabbed Joy, they grabbed the baby, they handed them over at a small, isolated house. Job done. Which doctor? I asked, my voice tight. Dr. Adami, he said. Hearing that name out loud nearly made me black out. The same doctor who had delivered our child, the man who had told us everything would be fine, who had stood in that chaotic hospital pretending to help us, had been the architect of this nightmare. The police tracked him down to a small, run-down clinic in a poor neighborhood, a far cry from the hospital he used to work in. When he saw Detective Chidi and me walk in, his face went gray. His hands started to shake. He tried to act confused, but the detective cut that short fast. "You can talk here," Chidi said, "or you can talk in handcuffs at the station. Either way you're talking." Adami broke. He confessed to his gambling debts, to the dangerous people he owed money to the wealthy couple who approached him because they couldn't adopt legally, offering him a huge sum for a healthy baby, no questions asked. He admitted that when Joy delivered twins in that chaotic ward, he saw a chance. Hide one baby immediately, tell no one, sell him. Then, to cover his tracks and prevent anyone from discovering a missing twin, he arranged the kidnapping during the ambulance transfer. When he took Joy and the second baby to the remote house, he lied that the baby was dying, drugged her so she would be too weak to escape. But Joy was stronger than he anticipated. Even drugged and dizzy, she waited for her moment and fled into the forest, baby in her arms, in the dark. He followed. Somewhere along a slope, she stumbled, hit her head on a rock. He said she died instantly. The baby slipped from her arms and rolled into the leaves. In his panic and his fear, he didn't see the baby, assumed the child was dead with the mother. He buried Joy's body in a shallow grave and ran. Hours later, an old beggar walked through that same patch of forest, heard a faint crying, followed the sound, and found a newborn baby, cold and alone but alive. That baby was my son, the one I later saw on TV under the name Tunde. If you're still with me, take a second and think about how thin that thread was. One old man deciding to walk through that forest instead of another way. One small cry not swallowed by the night. How many times in our lives do we call things luck or fate without understanding that everything could have gone the other way? When Adami finished his story, my whole body was shaking. I wanted to lunge across the room. I wanted to wrap my hands around his throat. I wanted to scream in his face about the life he stole from me, from Joy, from our children. My fists clenched, my vision went narrow, and then Chidi's hand landed on my shoulder. "If you touch him," he said low, he winced twice, "let the law deal with him." I stepped back, chest heaving. We had answers now, But one question was still burning. "What about the other baby?" I asked Adami through gritted teeth. "The one you hid at birth." "Where is he?" He hesitated, and for a moment I thought he was going to lie, but then he dropped his gaze. "I sold him," he said, "to the couple. They took him to Abuja, Mr. and Mrs. Okafor. So that was the twist. I didn't just have one lost son. I had two. Twins. One had grown up in the shadows under a bridge, the other in a mansion in the capital. Tell me, how do you even process that? Do you feel grateful one of them had a comfortable life, or furious that he was raised by the people who bought him, or both, at the same time? Because that's where I was. Anger and relief and confusion all twisted together. The police got a warrant, and we flew to Abuja. The Okafor house was exactly what you'd expect from one of the richest families in the city. High-gate security guards, gleaming cars, a big house on a quiet, clean street. When Mrs. Okafor opened the door and saw the police and me standing there, her face drained of color. She called for her husband, who came out looking confused and slightly annoyed, until he heard why we were there. We didn't yell. We didn't throw accusations around. Detective Chidi laid out the facts, the confession from Adami, the kidnapping, the DNA results, the missing twin. As he spoke, I watched their faces crumble, not with anger or indifference, but with shame. They admitted it. Years ago, they had tried to adopt legally, but were denied over and over because of their age and some other complications. Desperation took them down a dark path. They contacted a man they knew was corrupt, a man who said he could arrange a baby, no formal adoption needed. They knew it wasn't right, but they pushed that part of their brain aside, told themselves that love would make up for it, that they were giving a child a good life. When Adami handed them a healthy baby boy, they named him David and raised him like their own flesh and blood. Mrs. Okafor sobbed as she spoke, clutching at the edge of her dress. "We always feared this day would come," she said. "We love him. Please believe that. We love him." I did believe that. And let me tell you, that made everything harder, not easier. Legally, they were in deep trouble. They had received a trafficked child they had paid for a human being, even if they wrapped it in the language of adoption. But emotionally, things were not black and white. They had raised him, fed him, held him. When he was sick, gone to his school events, celebrated his birthdays. The next step was the hardest one, meeting David. He was at school, a private one, neat lawns, a big sign at the entrance, kids in uniforms. The principal, shocked but cooperative, brought him to the office where we were waiting. He walked in, a boy in a crisp uniform backpack over one shoulder, eyes confused behind his big glasses, looking from the principal to his parents, then to me and the detective. And my heart stopped because it was like looking at Tunde in different packaging. Same eyes, same jawline, same little crease at the corner of the mouth when he frowned. The fuller cheeks of a well-fed child, the calm posture of someone who never wondered where he'd sleep at night. We explained as gently as we could that there had been a crime when he was born, that the doctor had stolen him, that he had a twin brother, that I was his biological father. He stared at us like we were talking about a movie, not his life. "No," he said finally, his voice cracking. "No, that's not true. They are my parents. They raised me. I don't know you." And he was right. He didn't know me. Not yet. Do you see the mess now? The moral knot we were standing in. What does justice look like here? What does love look like? What does fairness look like for a child who did nothing wrong? Back at the Okafor house, when the lawyers and officers started talking about charges, about custody, about rights, I sat on their expensive couch and thought about both of my sons. One upstairs in my house, one sitting across from me. now eyes red, hands shaking. The law said I could walk in, claim David, and walk out with him. Biology day paperwork, all on my side. But everything in me resisted the idea of tearing this boy away overnight from the only home he'd ever known, just to satisfy my own sense of justice. So I did something that surprised everyone in that room, including myself. I said, I am not going to take David away from you today. The room went totally quiet. I have been angry for 9 years, I said. I have imagined this moment 1,000 times. But if I walk out of here with him, the person who gets hurt the most is him. He is innocent. He didn't choose any of this. So here is what I want. I want the truth to be told and not hidden. I want him to know who he is, who his brother is, who I am. I want legal recognition as his father. I want shared custody time with him, space for a relationship to grow. And I want you. I looked at the Okafors to face the law for what you did, but not in a way that destroys him in the process. Do you think that's fair? Or do you think I should have pushed for the harshest sentence possible and taken my son away on the spot? I really want to know what you think, because I still ask myself that sometimes. In court later, Adami was sentenced to life in prison for kidnapping, manslaughter, and trafficking. The ambulance drivers were punished for their role and their cowardly silence. The Okafors received lighter sentences than some people thought they deserved. Fines, community service, mandatory cooperation with my custody arrangement. But the judge took into account their full cooperation and the genuine love they had shown David over the years. We arranged that David would stay with the Okafors during school terms to keep his life stable, but that he would spend weekends, holidays, and long school breaks with me and Tunda in Lagos. At 18, he would legally be free to choose how he wanted to structure his life between both families. The first time David came to my house, the same house that had stunned Tunde, was another moment I will never forget. The Okafors pulled up in their car. David stepped out, clutching his backpack like a shield again. Tunde stood on the front steps, hands stuffed in his pockets, nervous in a way I hadn't seen him before. They looked at each other, two boys with the same face, same scar, raised in two different worlds, standing just a few feet apart. "Hi," Tunde said, first voice barely above a whisper. "Hi," David replied. They were shy at first, but curiosity won. They went upstairs to Tunde's room, and we adults stayed downstairs, listening to muffled voices filtering down through the ceiling. Later, they told me what they talked about, how they compared their lives. How Tunde described sleeping under bridges and eating leftovers from the trash. And David talked about school trips, birthday parties, soccer games. At one point, David started crying, saying he felt guilty for having so much when his twin had nothing. And do you know what Tunde told him? He said, "It's not your fault. We did not choose. They chose. We both lost something. We are both victims." That's the moment I knew my sons were going to be all right, because they understood something many adults don't, that pain doesn't have to turn you into a weapon. As the years passed, they developed their own bond, one that didn't erase the hurt, but transformed it into something useful. They helped each other with schoolwork, shared jokes, argued about soccer teams, teased each other about girls. David helped Tunde catch up academically. Tunde helped David understand the reality outside of gated estates and polished floors. I watched them grow up like that, half in awe, half in constant gratitude. At the same time, joy's hope. The foundation we built grew too. We opened more shelters, hired teachers, doctors, counselors, worked with the government to improve policies for street children, lobbied for better protection against trafficking, and pushed for accountability in hospitals. Tunde became the public face of our mission. The boy who went from bridge to boardroom, speaking on TV at conferences and schools, telling his story in simple, honest words. He'd say things like, "I slept where some of you park your cars." Now I begged, Where some of you roll up your windows and somebody saw me and decided that was not the end of my story, and you could see entire rooms shift as those words landed. David, meanwhile, became a pediatrician. He spent his days in a hospital helping children instead of hurting them like that doctor had done to him and his brother. And on his off days, he volunteered at Joy's Hope clinics, giving free care to kids whose families could not pay. Eventually, they both had families of their own. I got to hold my grandchildren's small, warm bodies with familiar eyes, and I told them stories about their grandmother Joy, about how brave she was, about how much she wanted them to exist, even though she never lived to see them. We would visit her grave under that tree with white flowers, and the kids would place their own bunch of blooms on the soil. Now I'm old. My hair has more gray than black. My steps have slowed. My hands have more wrinkles than smooth skin. In the afternoons, I like to sit in the garden, listening to my grandchildren laughing near the fountain, watching them chase each other across the grass, their lives full and loud and safe in a way my sons never had. Sometimes I sit there with a cup of tea feeling the sun on my face, and my fingers drift to that scar on my left hand. I trace it lightly, and I think about how many years I spent ignoring it, how many times I washed my hands without noticing that quiet map etched into my skin. And I think about that day in my office when a boy on a TV screen raised his scarred hand to the camera, and the universe tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Look, that's yours." So here's what I want to leave you with, if you're still watching. First of all, thank you for listening to all of this. I know it was a lot, but real stories usually are. Second, I want to ask you some questions, and I genuinely want you to answer them in the comments. Not for me, but maybe for yourself. Do you think I did the right thing? With the Okafors, should I have pushed for harsher punishment taken? David Away immediately cut them out of his life completely for what they did. Or was it right to focus on what was best for him, even if that meant making peace with people who had benefited from my pain? When you think about illegal adoptions, about people who just want a child, but turn a blind eye to where that child comes from, do you think they are victims of a broken system? Or part of the problem that keeps it broken? And what about the kids under the bridges right now? Not just in Lagos, but in your city, your country. The ones we step around, drive past. Change the channel to avoid. How many of them could grow up to change lives? If someone just stopped, really looked and said, "Come with me. I'm not going to leave you here." If any part of my story made you angry or hopeful, or made you think I would have done that differently, tell me. Tell us if it were you. What would you have done? Where do you draw the line between justice and mercy, between punishment and redemption? Do you believe people like the Okafors deserve forgiveness if they commit to making things right? Or do some actions put you beyond that? Drop your thoughts, your feelings, your own stories. Below, maybe you've lived through something that forced you to face a hard truth about family loss, adoption, or forgiveness. And if you feel like more people need to hear stories that aren't simple, that don't wrap everything up in a neat little bow, hit like, share this video with someone who needs a reminder that scars can lead to something beautiful, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story we tell here. Because sometimes the smallest mark on your skin is connected to a whole world of people you haven't met yet. And you never know whose life might change, including your own, just because you decided to really look.